Hey everybody, welcome to this edition of Channel Talk. Today we're going to be talking about the valuation of MSPs and how what's involved in your MRR strategy is important. For those of you who are just joining us and is not quite familiar how it works, if you want to have any questions to ask, there's a chat box to your screen. Just enter that and we'll tackle those towards the end. Today we're going to be talking to Aaron Ferrigan. He's the Executive VP of Asigra, and he's got some interesting insights on how MRR strategies can help your business in terms of business evaluation. Before we get started, some of the things that we've been fielding from the audience in terms of the channel partners out there is roughly 3 out of 4 channel partners, MSPs that is, tell us that they would like to possibly sell or exit the business. When and how they do this is really something up for their discussion. But one of the things that they always come back to tell us is about their business evaluation. I think there is no question right now that most of the VARs, traditional VARs out there, are having a tough time in getting a strong business evaluation on their business when they're ready to sell it. And we're also finding that MSPs are also falling into this category more and more every day. And the question then becomes, what is an MSP business? How strong is the monthly recurring revenue? And why does it matter to have proper controls in terms of the quality and customer ownership when it comes to your MRR book of business? So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Aaron, and he's going to walk us through some of the do's and don'ts and what to look for when it comes to building an MRR game plan. Aaron, how are you? Welcome.
Thanks, Julian.
I'm going to have you take this away with your presentation, and
Okay.
we'll ask questions throughout, and we'll convene right after your presentation and talk some more. All right?
Awesome. All right. So yeah, just to echo what your intro, and thanks for that. It's really today's talk is about how to build a stronger, more profitable, sustainable, long-term sustainable business. And the long-term sustainability is really important for a buyer. They need to make sure that the business will be around. How to do that, and then how to prepare then to sell at a higher value, as you said, when the time is right, when your time is right as an MSP. So that's really what kind of we're going to talk about. This is me. This is what I look like. I've been working with channel partners for coming up on 25 years, and always with partners and do everything with partners. So let's talk a bit about the MRR journey. What does this journey look like? Where have we come from, and kind of where are we now, and what have we gone through? So, not telling anything you don't know already, MSPs have come from the long way, traditional VAR model, sell once, collect once. I think the business was really good then. This is about, more than 15 years ago, 20, 25 years ago, even now. A lot of really healthy margins. It got very competitive. But at some point in the early 2000s, VARs lost control. And because it was very lucrative to be a VAR, there was a lot of competition. And with competition, the margins came down. The vendors started to play favorites with their partners. I think everybody on the phone that's an MSP kind of witnessed this, nothing new here. And as a result, as soon as the margins really dropped very dramatically, somewhere below 15%, it was very difficult, if not impossible, for a VAR to remain in business. And then everybody made the shift to MRR. And so if you didn't, you kind of went out of business. That's the cost of not doing it. So if you could, you did move to what's called now the MSP model, the MRR, monthly recurring revenue model. And these little icons there are Bitcoins. This is where VARs that were able to do this survived. They stayed in business. And during this kind of transition, this shift, came about, entered the market, these cloud vendors, these channel-only cloud vendors that came to the MSP community and said, hey, instead of standing up your own cloud service, it's really expensive, complicated, and risky to do, why don't you just resell our cloud service? Whether it was monitoring or backup or VoIP services, lots of different types of cloud services came about, and these channel-only vendors came and said, don't do it yourself, just resell ours. So a lot of VARs did that, and it was very good sense to do it. And this is what helped many VARs to cross that revenue chasm and actually become MSPs by brokering or reselling existing cloud services. So up till about 2 years ago, it was a really good business. I think about 2 years ago or so, the margins of being in a kind of an MSP and brokering, reselling someone else's service, margins were good. But I think about 2 years ago, the margins started to decline. The average of kind of cloud channel only cloud services are about 20%, sometimes even lower than 20%. But in this model, there are some problems, and we'll talk through them in a couple of slides. So about 2 years ago, savvy MSPs that really had their eye on looking to sell their business thought, okay, how do I get more value for my business when it's time for me to sell it, and how do I sell it more on my terms? And these discussions have been going on 24 months, 12 to 24 months now in the MSP peer groups and other channel conferences and so on. And so the shift now is into higher value or high value MRR. So still with MRR, but high value MRR. And that's where the MSP owns the IP, owns really the relationships, has much higher margins, kind of 40 to 60% margins instead of the around 20% margins. And at the end of the day, this is all good because when the time is to sell the business, an MSP gets a lot more money for their business. So what happened? How did we get to there? How did that journey? In about 10 plus years ago, 2007, that cloud vendor, that channel only cloud vendor pitch was very alluring. In some cases, it's still very alluring to VARs that are just now making that, trying to cross that revenue chasm from sell once, collect once to sell once, collect every month to the MRR. And basically the vendors, these channel only vendors are saying, you don't want to be in the application business. You don't want to be a software company and make the application. You don't want that risk. You don't want to risk, assume all that perceived risk around holding the data, even though it's encrypted and all that kind of stuff. There really is not risk there. And you still get to keep your customers if you broker our service. So we're going to do all the hard work. You're going to get to keep your customers and you're going to keep the profit. That's the pitch. And it's a really good pitch, except what the vendors don't tell you, or what VARs have now realized, or the MSPs now have realized 10 years on, is that this is not always the healthiest thing for the MSP. Again, the context of today's call is how do you get the highest price for your MSP? This is not necessarily the way to do it. And there's a couple of main reasons. First of all, the cloud vendor gets to decide what your margins are going to be, and they have absolutely declined in the last 10 years, as they invariably do. When you broker or resell somebody else's cloud service, they know who the customers are. It's in the legal agreements. They have nexus, what's called legal nexus to the end customers. They can communicate with them, and invariably some vendors do. They communicate, they market, they right over the heads of the MSP, and they offer them new technologies, new features, new functions, whatever new offerings that they have. And then finally, and that irritates MSPs because the currency of the partner really is that relationship, and it dilutes the customer relationship. And then finally, on the right, it ultimately devalues the company because it reduces the stickiness between the relationship, the end customer and the MSP. And when the stickiness goes away, the value goes away as well. And we'll talk more about that. So again, just to repeat, why you lose control of your margins. The vendor gets to decide what the price is. There is kind of a market price. It's very highly competitive. And in some cases, they move customers to their favorite MSPs as well. Your customers become their customers. They know who the customers are, and that secrecy, you can just almost imagine 10, 12, 15 years ago, if you're a VAR, would you ever go to HP, Cisco, IBM, any of these big vendors that everybody had to be in business with? Would you give your customer list to them? No, not even to your distie. It was your prized possession, your secret. Well, today, that secret is out when you're reselling somebody else's service. There's no masking, customer list masking in that world, and partners get taken advantage of that. And then finally, because of this lower stickiness, the value of those customer contracts, that MRR, those agreements, is lower when you sell your business. Because if there's a lot of work that the buyer has to do in order to keep those customers, because they're fairly easily moved to another broker, another MSP, or you could even take them and move them to another vendor, and the vendor knows that. And so because they're fairly kind of dynamic and movable, the buyer of your business will have to work fairly hard to make sure that those customers don't leave, and the cost of doing that work is going to come out of that offer price that they're going to give you. So more stickiness, higher price. And This contrasts with delivering the service yourself. When you deliver the service yourself, you keep the value of your business in your business and not hand the value over to your cloud vendor, your channel only cloud vendor. And you do this in a couple of different ways. Again, you decide from where and how you want to deliver the service. If you have infrastructure, if you have a data center, if you have a colo, or you can leverage public hyperclouds, you deliver it from where and how you want to deliver it. You don't have to have infrastructure like you did maybe 10, 12, 15 years ago. You can charge what you want, and partners have different business models, leading complementary, trailing complementary, or centric. It could be a loss leader. It could be the way you keep the margin. It's up to you. You decide it's your service, what your good price and what your margin is going to be. You get to control the customer relationship. The underlying technology vendors that you use have no visibility into your customer lists. They don't know who your customers are, and as a result can't communicate with the end customers. And that's good for you. It's very much like the good old days when your vendors and your disties had no idea who your customers were. You controlled that. Finally, because of all this stickiness, the value of your business is much higher. So when you end up selling your business, you'll probably do a quality of earnings analysis, and you'll get such a report. And what they do is the buyers are very sophisticated, and they're looking at your revenue mix. How much of your business is still revenue you derive from reselling products? How much of it is from low value, and how much of it is from high value MRR? In other words, how much do you broker and resell and is less sticky, and how much of it is stickier? And you want to, over the next couple of years, if you haven't already done so, think about, and if you've started this shift, you want to raise it or enhance it or double down on it, shifting from left to right. You want to increase the percentage of your revenue mix of being high value MRR. These are services that you deliver versus reselling, so that you can get a high price for your business on the day that you sell it. And to repeat, the stickiness, a buyer will see, your business has higher renewal rates when you're delivering the service and when it's sticky. They see higher retention rates, and they also see more opportunities to co-sell and to upsell more revenue. And these are the kind of synergies that a buyer sees, and they're going to value that when you're delivering the service. So your business also gets to be seen as expansive and not just, oh my God, I just need to maintain my customers to make sure nobody takes them away from me, or my cloud vendor doesn't move them to their favorite broker, or another broker doesn't poach them, from me. And you're therefore able to basically allocate your revenue and your margin that you get to growing your business, to expanding it, and a buyer sees that. So therefore it's worth more. Here's some examples of very straightforward, very easy to do services that you can deliver yourself instead of broker or resell or be a sales agent for. VoIP services, authentication as a service, monitoring, of course, backup, very easy to do these days. Requires very little investment to get into it, very straightforward. These types of services are a bit more involved. You need some more expertise, which the vendors can provide you training on and processes to make sure that you can do. They're perceived as higher value by buyers because they're tougher to do, but then as a result of you delivering them, you get a higher value for each customer contract you have on these, so your business gets to be worth more, but they take a bit more energy and expertise to do, but absolutely doable. Technologies are available to get them done today. So as we're getting to the end here, you can see that as partners through this journey, this MRR journey, crossed that chasm, the big gray area was very hard to do. There were, of course, many casualties in the mid 2000s. Many VARs kind of didn't make it. They couldn't move from this very choppy, every month is a new month, kind of sell once, collect once revenue model. But the ones that did, the ones that existed, the ones that are around today, they understand, they get their maturity and understanding of the MRR business model is very high today. And today, with the advent of new technologies, new automation, and the chasm to move from low value to high value is very straightforward, very easy, very low cost, and very low risk to do. If you're thinking about selling your business in the next, 2, 5, 7 years, you really want to position your business and really be able to sell it on your terms for a much higher price. And you absolutely can build really good, sustainable, profitable, repeatable MSP business by shifting more of your revenue mix to being more high value revenue. I'll pause here, Julian, and pass it back to you.
So what you're saying here, Aaron, is basically, of course, getting recurring revenue every month. That's the key, right? You definitely need that moving forward. Everybody understands that. And of course, then you get into the quality of the recurring revenue and dissecting that a little bit. I know many MSPs tell me in the past, wow, it's a big investment to get into that game. You've got to spin up lots of servers, you've got to lots of quality stuff and SLA agreements, and the list just goes on and on. Can you give us and I know you are with Asigra, so you're in the BDR space. So compared to how it was in the past, to crossing that new chasm now to get into doing your own IP and baking out your own brand, what is involved in terms of the heavy lifting for an MSP to do that today?
Right. Okay. So, I mean, there's a couple of lenses to answer that question that we can look through. The first one, I'll just start at the obvious one, the cost. 10 plus years ago, in the early days of MRR, it cost, six digits, a couple of $100,000. You needed to train some of your folks, technical folks, from being pre-sales and kind of going on site and doing things to being more service oriented. And it did cost you $150,000, $250,000 to buy infrastructure, buy server storage. You needed to buy co-location space, or at the time, many partners, there was no colo space, so many partners kind of built their own data centers. And so today, instead of spending a couple of $100,000, you can start with like $500 a month, and you don't even have to have your own infrastructure. You can do, and many partners have their own infrastructure, but you can start in the public cloud. You can stand up services there. You can deliver all this automation. Another lens, so the costs have they're just on a completely different magnitude below than what they used to be. The other layer is the number of people. Because of the technology and the automation improvements in the last decade, it's about 15% of a full-time employee that you can start with to deliver backup services for sure, but other services, equally low people print of the software because a lot of automation has been built in. I think the sale of it, the message and the pitch 10 plus years ago to the end customers was tougher. Instead of the customer understanding, okay, let me buy the technology, I'll own the asset and kind of, run it. Buying cloud services, monthly services was a harder sell at the time, is now much easier today because this is just the way businesses buy technology. They're buying it as a service. That concept is much more familiar to them. And I think the compensation and the operational internally for an MSP has also really become simple. The old compensation plans, how do you move a salesperson that you pay, salary plus commission on every 5-digit, 6-digit sale they make? How do you move them to a 4-digit, 3-digit monthly sale and still keep them in your business? All that has been done. That shift, that revenue chasm, the business chasm has been done. So it's a lot easier, and partners are much more mature today on understanding the MRR and building it. They have it. They do MRR today. It's really about improving and increasing the quality of that MRR, and it's a lot simpler to do.
Right. We're feeling some questions here. I'll get to a couple of them in a second. I just had one more comment and another question for you as well. So, many years ago, when we were doing research, and we still update the research papers on the secrets of the best and most successful MSPs on the planet, I won't go through the whole list, but in general, there is one thing that always popped out, and that is the most successful MSPs built their own IP. And I do remember years ago when you talked about them building out their IP, it was quite an expensive venture, their own data centers and their own structures and stacks and so on. And then it became a lot easier. And one of the things that is sort of not understood out there is that IP is not just about developing an application or a product, it's about a process, right? So if you can develop a process around something, that is your IP and that's your thing. So controlling that IP and baking that IP out yourself is really critical. So I agree that as the MSP business transitions and the MRR kind of solutions transition, MSPs do need to keep up with the times to ensure that they're, on the right curve, right? So looking at, what you're doing, let's say you're an MSP and you've got a book of business already with whether it's BDR or security or whatever that is, right? and you'd like to kind of bake out your own solution. You talked a bit about it's not very expensive. It's about what 15% of a body to basically put it together. Giving a kind of an estimation time, just to kind of give everyone there an idea, what amount of time would you say an MSP could go from where they currently are to having their own BDR IP kind of solution set up on their own brand?
60 days. So when they make the decision that they want to do it and they've picked a vendor that they want to do this with, within 60 days, a credible vendor with a credible onboarding process can take a partner from having a brokered service to a self-delivered service, providing them the processes and the ability. In terms of contracts, and everything else, you can do it within 60 days. So it's not a insurmountable thing. It's really an executive business decision to want to do it. And then today's presentation is about using the catalyst of wanting to sell your business sometime in the next, year, 2, 3 or 4 years, whatever. Use that as a catalyst to increase the value of your business and then making that decision.
I got one question here from a member here that they talked about the hosting. Does it really matter where you host this stuff anymore? And do you have any recommendations when it comes to where should an MSP maybe host their stuff?
It does matter. And the answer is governed by what your customers need. Some MSPs focus on industry verticals where compliance and other types of regulations require them to host or to keep data in specific, they have data sovereignty rules and regulations around their data. So they'll have to put it in a data center within, their country or their county or in a specific location. If you are delivering services to customers that don't have such restrictions, then it doesn't matter. You can host it kind of anywhere where you already have. Most MSPs have a relationship with either a public hoster or a colo facility that they exist, or they are a hoster themselves.
There's so many crazy choices today. Of course, you've got Azure, you've got Google, you've got Amazon. There's so many public clouds with their specific type of security aspects around their cloud, right? So you don't really have to bake this out in your own backyard, right?
Nope.
You can actually go to a public cloud and leverage their strength and power globally, correct?
100%. 100%. It's infrastructure as a service, and you can buy that today as you need and scale it on an fully OpEx basis to, with the ebbs and flows as your business is in the marketplace.
I got another question here from a member here, an audience. So how do you figure out if your cloud vendor have access to your customer list? I'm not quite sure how we'd answer that, but how would you go about figuring out if you're an MSP, how would I know if my cloud vendor has my access to my customers?
Well, the first place to start is go look at your legal agreement with them when you signed. Not what a salesperson told you in an email, but what does your legal agreement say? Most cloud vendors have nexus to the end customer, which means they know who the customers are. And when you register deals with your cloud vendor, guess what? You're telling them who the customer is. So they know. If you're not hosting the service yourself and they're not demonstrating to you that they absolutely cannot see who the customers are, and they don't want to give that to you in writing, represent it, it's not enough for them to say, oh, that's not our business model. We don't care about who the end customers are. The question is really, can you see them, yes or no? And when you're not hosting the service, they can see them.
It's quite interesting because I think MSPs are really they trust a lot, of course, with their cloud vendors. But there's some things obviously that they can't get around, right? For example, if you are, reselling Microsoft stuff, right? You really can't get around those applications. You've got to go through their platforms, right? So in a way, you're not really talking about looking to host and manage all of your recurring revenue managed services, right? It's very specific ones, right?
Correct. So yeah, there are absolutely, if you look at those, pie, see if I can go up there to that pie chart that we had up here. Here it is. There are always going to be services that as an MSP, you should be brokering them because you're not going to stand up every type of service like Office 365. Do you really want to go and compete with Microsoft tomorrow? That game is done. You know, they're going to own that space. G Suite is the other participant there. There are, you know, distinct other kind of hosted exchange and so forth, but as an MSP, you don't want to do it. Those are types of services that you don't. Again, CRM, are you going to go and compete with Salesforce tomorrow? Not really. So there are absolutely services, cloud services, that you should broker because it doesn't make sense, and you won't be able to make a compelling, competitive offering in the marketplace. But there are other ones like backup, like monitoring, you know, like the ones that we have, you know, here. I think we listed some archiving services, VoIP services. Those are very easy, and you should be the one that delivers them. Very low infrastructure requirement, very simple, straightforward to do. So not everything should be delivered, but absolutely there are low-hanging fruit like these that you should be delivering. These are a bit more involved. You'll get paid more if you can deliver them and when you deliver them. But yeah, not everything. There are some that you should continue to broker.
Got it, Sharon. I'm gonna let you have the last word there. So, what would be your recommendation to all the MSPs out there looking to hopefully sell their business? And it's not just selling their business, right? Sometimes these companies would like to go get a loan, credit line, that type of stuff, and they've got to explain this to their financial institution, bank manager, that type of stuff. So, there's lots of reasons why you want to up your business valuation. So what would be your recommendation to these companies? Obviously, take a look at their their book of business, but and figure out what they can do. But what would you tell them to do?
I would say look at the existing services that you're doing MRR for today. Look at the ones that you are brokering. And if those ones that you are brokering today are fairly straightforward to move into high value MRR model to deliver them yourself, I would say do it. Do it in the next 12 months. Pick one or two services. You know, don't overdo them all at the same time. Pick one project, do another project after that. They take about 60 days to do, maybe 90 days, depending on how busy your business is. And that's what I would do. Just, you know, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You don't have to do, it's not a big thing to do. It's very straightforward. You just do it in small steps. And a good vendor that knows how to do this should have a very good onboarding process to guide you to make it as a no-brainer. So I would go out and look at my existing services and see which ones I can bite off and get done in the next quarter or two.
Great advice. So, Aaron, if everybody want to reach out, get your slide deck, and talk to you, there you go. There's your information. So, I encourage everybody to reach out to Aaron directly. The website is on there, asigra.com. They're involved, I believe, in the BDR business, and I think they've got a way for you to kind of build your own IP. Check it out with them. Let us know how it does, and bid you all farewell. It's been a pleasure, Aaron. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again on Channel Talk. Cheers.